Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Peaceful Does Not Mean Harmless, written by eddieddi. Gomlak, the destroyer of empires, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, as the fleet about him disintegrated, fragment by fragment. Each ship fled as its captains realized that the only option was to run or die, and even then it was a gamble. He looked back upon what brought this terrible fate upon him and realized he'd made a profound mistake. 65 hours ago, at the Council of Warlords.
"So they are a peaceful species. How do they handle pirates?"
one of the ministers asked, his tone gravelly and harsh. His species was known for its own piratical tendencies, plundering at trade lines and stealing ships. "They offer them better options," one of the report bringers said. "They are offered the opportunity to sell their ships at above market rates and given a place to live and look after until the end of their days on the provision they don't return to their piratical ways," the multi-limbed alien said as he looked over his notes. One extra pseudopod was used to shuffle through the notes. "That's pathetic," Gomlok shouted, and several of his fellow generals and the warlords nodded. This group of aliens had gotten together several generations ago, the mightiest empires, warlords, and pirate lords, and created this council of war to choose who to target, what their next raids would be, and how they'd avoid getting in one another's way. They'd realized that it was much easier if they chose soft targets, lesser races, and the like, rather than fighting one another. "I'm inclined to agree with your destructiveness," one of the report givers simpered. "However, it appears to be effective." One of Gomlak's fellow warlords, a mighty alien of 8.5 feet, responded by slamming a prosthetic limb on the table, causing it to shake.
"Weaklings! Fools! Pathetic lesser beings!"
it roared out. Again there was noises of agreement and assent from his fellow warmongers.
"Gather data on their military capacity and combat force,"
a third member of the council ordered the report givers, all of which scattered to do as they were ordered. Failing to do so would result in being tossed into a fight pits for their master's entertainment. The room erupted into a heated debate on who would lay claim and prizes of the resource-rich planets and new source of slaves. 60 hours ago, the Council of Warlords. The debate was partly concluded. It was between Gomlok and another warlord, this time a pirate lord by the name of Admiral Zarkoth. The debate was primarily on whose territory it reached into and what one would offer the other in return for the rights of first pillage. The report givers trembled their way back into the council room and waited for their presence to be acknowledged and given the right to speak. Once done, so they finally began. "This species, the humans, as they call themselves, have most of their military force as a strange, almost police-keeping force. They are used to keep pirates that do not take up their offer away from the shipping lanes or prevent squabbles between humans from escalating into fully-fledged fights. They are referred to as the United Humanity Security Force, or the UHSF. There was a pause when the warlords burst out laughing.
"A police force! Their military is a police force!"
Zarkoth barked out and looked at Gormak.
"You can take this pathetic species. They don't seem to be worth my time to fight. I still expect the normal 10% of the mineral wealth and 20% of the slaves taken," he said through his laughter, which caused him to once again bang the table. The table, reinforced since first meeting, shook, but was otherwise unaffected. Gormlak smiled. "Weak or not, they shall soon serve in the slave hold of my ships, and their worlds will be mined dry of raw metal to make more," he said, and looked at the report givers. "Do you have anything else to report?" he asked them. "Yes, Lord," one said in a quivering voice. "They have a violent history, but it seems that they have attempted to bury that once they reached space, claiming it to be peaceful and welcoming people, offering not only trade but sanctuary to any who desired it." More laughter from the assembled aliens. Fantastic. So they cannot complain when we claim that our form of sanctuary is to take all that I have and then take more.
Grimlock roared and stood up.
One more thing, your bloodthirstiness,
the report giver said, raising a small slip of paper.
They have a motto that they seem to tell anyone and everyone who comes close to their borders.
Motto or not, they will still be ground into dust and never interrupt me.
Grimlock bellowed, backhanding the report giver into the wall as he exited the chamber. The poor alien hit the far wall with the crunch of a breaking exoskeleton and slid down to the floor. A bright green trail of lifeblood left on the wall behind him to join the dozens of others that had been splattered there over a lifetime of the Council. 45 hours ago, UHSF listening post Zeta 3. Sir, we have a blip, called out one of the sensor techs. The station's captain walked over and looked at the sensor tech's display. He didn't understand it. A web of glowing lines and blinking dots in different colors.
Tell me what we're looking at,
he said, and the sensor tech shrugged. It's an FTL flash. We've had unregistered ships come out of FTL just within our borders of our space, he said as he started to flip small switches and type commands into the console. Within moments, on the larger screen above him, there was a depiction of the ship. It was small, angular, and clearly armed with something that looked akin to an energy fork, though it was clearly not of human build, with the rear engines being some kind of ring.
That's not one of ours, the captain said, and walked back to the center of the command deck. Forward the data to Central Command. Hopefully they've got something on this, he said, as another tech called out,
"Proximity alert!"
The entire station shook and the lights flickered.
"Shields out!"
the same tech yelled as the lights came back, growing a warning red.
Send a full alert now to all crew. Get to the escape pods. What the hell shot us? And get a full report to HQ as fast as possible.
The captain of the station roared out as alarms blared. The last thing he saw was the unknown ship come about for another pass on the station. But to his satisfaction, the last thing he heard was one of the techs yelling out,
"Report sent! HQ knows!"
before the ship blew a hole in the station and hurled them all into the void. 40 hours ago, the UHSF HQ.
Sir, this report is concerning. One of the men at the table said, an unknown craft came out of FTL, scanned the surrounding area, and then immediately blew the nearest 2 listening posts out of space. Then continued deeper into our territory. Last seen scouting mining bases around Vega 3.
There was a nodding and murmuring from the attending men and women. These individuals made up the highest-ranking positions in the UHSF. Heads of intelligence, the commanders of entire sectors. There was a pause, and they looked at each other, and then one of them spoke slowly.
"There are no pirates in this area. Of that we are certain. The last of them relocated to one of the farming planets 6 cycles ago,"
she said in a soft voice, tapping her lips with a finger.
And there have been no reports of any crisis in that direction since before I took my seat."
She paused again, clearly pondering the situation.
"I could see it could be a scout craft."
Her verbal pondering was interrupted as there was a banging on the door.
"Damn it!" one of the men yelled. "Who the hell is interrupting us now?"
His neighbor put a hand on his shoulder.
"Relax, Jack. The only reason they'd interrupt us would be because there is more information,"
he reminded the man called Jack, who relaxed into his seat. The door was thrown open by the guards, and a young-looking secretary surged in.
There's been an intercepted transmission,"
she blurted out, and practically tossed her tablet on the table.
"But it's clearly supposed to be intercepted,"
she finished, as the tablet beeped once and a projection came up. The creature in the projection was horrific, a patchwork of scars and stitches, missing one eye and the other prosthetic. The teeth were jagged stumps of metal.
"This is Gromlock, breaker of empires. My mighty war fleet has set its eyes on your puny collection of worlds. We know that you are a peaceful people, so surrender as is your nature, and I personally promise you will be treated with kindness in your slavery."
The figure laughed, spittle coming from between its lips, one of which had been split by some kind of bladed weapon long ago.
"If not, then I'm sure that we can find proper beds for your breeders. And nice fight pits for the rest of you.
The hologram cut off. The room was silent for a few moments before it erupted into shouts of protest, demands for retribution, before someone coughed quietly. The noise, though, cut through the sound and caused the room to go silent, as if it was banging on a gravel. The man at the head of the table drummed his fingers on the table.
We have been threatened. Put out a call to arms.
The room erupted in noise again, though this time it was directed, the sort of noise that comes from a dozen people with purpose. 35 hours ago, the bridge of the UHS Sword of Justice. The pirate base fell apart and started to lose orbital stability as the glittering beams of antimatter and cohesive light tore it apart. The captain of the ship smiled as the sister ship, the Fist of Peace, came around the curve of the planet, the last pirate ship being driven before it. With their base gone, the pirates would have little choice but to accept their offer of selling their ships and being given a parcel of land to live on. It wasn't a bad deal. It just took some convincing to get some people to take it. The ship's communication officer glanced up from his station and called out, "Captain, we have just had a fleet-wide message," he said, and waited for the captain to stop admiring the handiwork they'd done of the past half an hour and respond,
Fleet-wide. Do I hope they found time to call us in for a refit? The coffee machine going glunk and producing tomato soup is less funny, and far more annoying than it was the first time,"
he said as he lifted his mug, currently full of tea. No, sir, it's just 3 words and a set of coordinates." The captain stiffened at these words and set his mug down.
"What are the words and coordinates?"
he asked as he stood and walked to the communication officer station. "Call to arms, sir," the officer said, slightly confused. The captain nodded.
"All hands! 2 running stations, helm! Put those coordinates in, spool up the jump drive. Tell me how long it'll take us to get there,"
he said as he looked at his mug and sighed.
"And someone grind up some beans or something. I'm gonna need something stronger than this," he added.
30 hours ago, aboard the Worldbreaker, Gomlock laughed as his crew celebrated. It was time for conquest. They'd been stuck with puny species that had been beaten so often they'd just given up defending, or were so pathetic that they offered Gomlack's fleet a tithe to go away. This, however, was new blood. He'd shared the council reports with his crew and sub-captains, and they were all excited. There was no fight like ones where the other party didn't fight back. They'd even brought a few of their slaves up for the lower decks to be sacrificed and have their blood used to make ceremonial paint. Normally, they just used the synthesized paint, but this was the first fight with a new species. It was always special and deserved some ceremony. This species bled blue, so the war paint was an odd green blue with the pigments mixed with the blood on the executed slave. Our scouts have reported no resistance and is currently holding position around the mining station. They even reported that all humans aboard the mining station have fled, leaving their resources behind. They've requested permission to plunder, one of Gomlack's seconds reported. Gomlack laughed.
"Denied! I claim the right of first treasure. These puny humans are going to be ground to a pulp under my boot, and then they can continue working their little mining stations. But we'll be the ones to profit," he cackled. "Light the jump engines! I cannot wait any longer. Any ship that isn't ready is getting left behind and can pick up the scraps,"
he bellowed and stomped to the command podium. 25 hours ago, the wreckage of listening station Zeta 3. Space rippled and split as the ship tore its way free of null space that was used for FTL travel. Its prow bumped the wreckage of the listening station aside as it emerged from an alternate reality. Clouds of water vapor poured off its hull as glittering fragments of frozen gases twisted free, and the unreality of null space conformed to the laws of physics, snapping from unknown, impossible substances to more mundane things like methane and hydrogen. Free of the FTL shift, the ship's main weapons pivoted as if looking for threats, all suddenly snapping to a location a few thousand kilometers away where another ship was plowing into reality. There was a tense moment before the weapons resumed their tracking, the other ship identified as a friend. All across local space, this scene repeated itself. Human ships emerging from FTL, Most seemed to be expecting hostiles and were ready for a fight. Upon the bridge of Sword of Justice, the captain had woken up from a brief sleep while in FTL, and had also acquired a cup of coffee courtesy of the ship's hydroponics bay, having had a recent addition of rapid growth coffee beans when the ship had first encountered its tomato soup issue. He stood, mug in hand, surveying the scans as they were presented to him.
That's the Indomitable, flagship of the 3rd Fleet. There's Skybreaker of the 8th Fleet, he said, confused. Just how widespread was the call?
He asked out loud. One of the officers finally asked the question most of them had been asking each other in the mess. "Sir, what did the message call to arms mean?" he asked.
A call to arms, the captain said,
and you could hear the capital letters.
Is a widespread message for a given number of ships to move to a specific location and prepare for a fight. Normally, an emergency message for either reinforcements or because of a hostile force. Normally, it is only fleet-wide or sometimes covers 2 fleets if it's serious,
he said as the long-range FTL scanner blared a warning. There was a massive object in FTL coming towards them. 7 hours ago, Gomlock's ship came out of FTL some distance from where the scout had exited. There was a gravitational anomaly ahead of them, one the scout hadn't reported. They couldn't see what it was as there was no light in the local area beyond the ambient light of the distant stars, and there was even more interference for the scanners from what appeared to be debris field between them and the gravitational anomaly.
"Tell me what the hell that is," Gomlock demanded of his seconds. "I don't care about the interference. Just send a probe or something. Why didn't the scout report it?"
Then he added,
"And why hasn't the scout reported in?"
5 hours ago, aboard the War Sun Final Edict. "Do you think he'll buy it, sir?" asked the second-in-command of the Titanic war machine, a weaponized Dyson swarm and stellar engine, capable of transporting itself through FTL warp. The Final Edict was the gravitational anomaly, and the debris field was the ground total of humanity's fleets running silent and with all external systems disabled, except for the jamming fields. The one downside of this was there was only one real form of communication, and that was tight beam laser communication, and even then, that was kept to a minimum. The commander of the battle station shrugged. "I hope he does. It'll be better that way, but even if he doesn't, we've excited the surface of the sun to the point of being ready for a directed coronal mass ejection and then some," the commander said, and the second-in-command blinked a few times. With the immense firepower on the external layers of the station, as well as over 4,000 ships that were drifting in space before them, he'd almost discounted the fact that they might go through with the suggestion of unshielding the star. 1 hour ago, aboard the Worldbreaker, Gomlek roared in frustration.
"I don't give a Morlach's ass what it might be. I just want you to tell me if the spinal cannon is charged. We'll just blast it apart. Pathetic humans thinking they a pile of metal scraps can keep me from my prize,"
he screamed as he rounded on the sub-commanders. The scans of the debris field and even the attempted probes had come back with negatives, garbled responses, and mostly failed scans. All they knew was it was metal dense, had chunks of carbon-rich resources, and a gravitational anomaly with some kind of metallic mass. Probably the humans attempting to dump a bunch of mines, or just scrap to buy themselves time. He'd seen it before. If it was scrap, it would be melted down and used to build more ships. Mines could be shot apart the moment they activated.
"Full ahead! We're going to blast our way through!"
he roared into the ear of his helmsman, who winced but followed the order as Gomlak stomped his way back to the command dais. He was going to wring the neck of the first human prisoners himself, just to satiate his vengeance. 30 minutes ago, aboard the Final Edict. "He bought it, sir," the second-in-command said with a grin on his face, as Gomlak's ships came into range of the War Sun's weapons and Corona cannon. "Excellent. Send the command," the commander said as throughout the fleet, communications lasers flickered between ships, and reactors were brought back up to maximum drive. The lights came on across the fleet, trapping Gomlak's ships in a net of steel and fury, as humanity showed the alien fleet just what threatening it resulted in. 15 minutes ago, aboard the Final Edict. "They don't seem to want to surrender, do they?" the commander commented to his second-in-command. "I don't think it's in their dictionary, sir." His second mentioned as he looked up from the tactical plot of the ongoing fight. It was very one-sided. The enemy fleet was outnumbered, over 600 to 1. The only reason they had not been broken apart in space dust was the final edict hadn't fired anything bigger than an antimatter cannon, and the alien shields were shockingly resistant to most weapons the human fleet possessed. The solar capacitors are full. Unshield the sun and fire the coronal cannon, the commander said, and his second grinned with a wicked smile. Yes, sir. 5 minutes ago, aboard the Worldbreaker, Comlach's jaw fell open. The enemy's battle station, well, that's what it had to be, a hastily thrown together battle station, made up of metal and guns, and little else, had started to move. Its outer shield unfolded to reveal the blazing white light of the star inside. Then, the surface of the star had exploded. Half of his fleet had melted under the blast of the superheated gases and particles. The rest were blind from the electromagnetic radiation, and his own ship had lost power because of the energy pulse. The humans had built a battle station around a sun. No wonder, it was a gravitational anomaly. They were moving a sun around like it was some kind of warship. Then the thing fired again. Another chunk of his fleet vanished, as from somewhere inside the abominable battle Dyson sphere came a blast of solar energy concentrated into a focused beam, turning anything that touched it into little more than molten heaps of slowly drifting metal. Current time. Comlach, the destroyer of empires, commander of the Worldbreaker, warlord of several dozen systems, terror of the Gorgon Nebula, cowered in fear aboard his flagship. He had made a terrible mistake. His fleet was in ruins. His life was seconds from ending. He'd not even made it a single AU into the human space. He looked back at where he'd made the error and realized something, a mistake he'd made when considering humanity and its nature. Peaceful didn't mean harmless. Then the war sun fired again, and he was little more than a glittering dust, blown away on the solar wind. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnold, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azrakal. Thank you very much.